All my life, I was very close with my great-grandmother. We lived down the street from her and visited every week, then every day once my great-grandfather passed. She had 8 children and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She used to tell me not to tell anyone, but I was her favorite, because I had lived with her, not because she loved anyone else any less. She passed away last year, before my daughter's first birthday. She loved my daughter very much. In fact, she was the last child that she ever held before her passing. These last few months have been strange. I'm currently pregnant with my second daughter. I'm due to have her on July 23rd. At my OB checkup, they sent me to the ultrasound floor for an emergency stress test due to the baby not moving. After being there for an hour, they informed me that she's healthy, but that she has dropped into the birth canal and I should expect her within a week at most. That was on July 2nd. I've begun to have painful contractions and have increased pressure in my hips. I know as a mom, she'll be here as soon as the doctors were definitely right. Well, here's where it gets weird. When my great-grandmother died, about 3 days later, my grandmother had a dream that she saw her. My great-grandmother had a tattoo on her arm in this dream with a date inside it. My grandmother said, "Mom, what's that for? I didn't know you had any tattoos." To which my great-grandmother replied, "It's just a very, very important date. That's all you need to know." The date in the tattoo was July 6th. Yesterday in the car, I asked my boyfriend's 4-year-old daughter when she thought her sister would be coming. Expecting a normal 4-year-old answer like tomorrow or next week, she told me 6. No day, just 6. I'm completely shocked, and if I do go into labor and have my daughter on the 6th, I'm not sure what I'll think. I've always been a believer in the paranormal, and I've had my own unexplainable experiences. But this, I have chills. My 2-year-old has been saying, "Hi, Mom," and waving at nothing. My great-aunt swore she saw her, and my other aunt left a pinwheel at her gravesite, and the wheel began to spin very quickly, with no wind blowing when she asked her if she was there. Could it be that she wants to meet my baby before she feels at rest? What do you guys think? The last week of July last year, I went to Ocean City, Maryland with my boyfriend at the time. The first few nights were great. I got to see a long-time friend who lives there, and he was tagging along with us the night it happened. My boyfriend and my friend decided they wanted to go get crab fries. I wasn't interested, because I just don't like Old Bay on fries. I'm sorry, sue me. So I decided to sit on a bench and wait for them. I saw a family go by, and I saw their daughter walking behind them. She looked really mad, and was texting quickly as if she was in a really heated argument. She had short, bleached white hair and really sick tattoos. That's what made her stick out to me. Her tattoos. They were awesome. So anyway, my boyfriend and friend came back over, and we walked behind that family for a while. We ended up getting distracted by the boardwalk performers, and I lost sight of them. I didn't think anything of it, though. Around 2 a.m., we were some of the only people on the boardwalk besides the small groups of drunk teenagers, smoking cigarettes and yelling. And I saw her again, running towards the bench, crying. I wanted to go after her and ask if she was okay, but my boyfriend advised me to just stay out of it and keep going. We went to our hotel and fell asleep. At about 6 a.m., I got up and rolled a joint and quietly left the room. The hotel we were staying at had a nice sitting area out front, looking over the ocean. I admired the view for a few minutes when I noticed her again. She was walking down the boardwalk, looking confused and scared. She was crying still. I got this weird gut feeling to follow her. I tucked my joint into the clutch and followed a little bit behind her. She looked nervous and was looking left and right as if she was lost. I followed her all the way to the 2nd Street beach ramp. She suddenly bursted into a full sprint, crying hysterically. I don't know why, but I shouted, "Hey, wait, do you need help?" I ran to the beach and just stood in shock. Nobody was there, but I could hear soft sobbing nearby to the right of me. I walked down the beach a little ways before I saw it. Where the sobbing sounds had led me, there was an arm sticking out from the sand. It was her arm. It was her tattoos. I'll never forget them. The sobbing stopped, and suddenly the ambient noises of the beach became louder again. I didn't notice at the time, but the whole time I was following her and then following the crying, everything else was completely silent. When I realized what I was looking at, I screamed for someone to call 911. A middle-aged couple came jogging up. The wife screamed and the husband dialed them right away. I didn't have my phone with me. I don't like when sand ends up in the charging port. The police arrived a little while later. When they took my statement, I didn't even know what to tell them. I said I'd been walking down the beach and just found her. It took them hours to dig her out. When they finally started to pull her out, they asked that all the civilians and witnesses be led away. As we were walking with the police to a nearby spot to answer more questions, I saw her standing behind them, looking down at her own body. She looked up at me, nodded, and then she was gone. Initially, the reports all said she sat in a hole and it collapsed around her, but then it was later discovered that the big sand cleaners may have pushed the sand into the hole by mistake. But here's where it gets scary. She had been missing since 2 a.m. She died somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., and yet I saw and followed her. The entire time, I swear she looked real. I still have dreams about her. I've never forgotten a single detail. My boyfriend and I have been together for a year, and we've recently found out I was pregnant with our first baby. After we found out, we decided we needed to get our lives together and buy our first house and move in together. After a few months of searching for our perfect home, we found one on the market, in our price range, just begging for us to buy it, with the previous owners keen to sell it to us as soon as possible. Now, growing up, I've always been aware of spirits, not seeing them, but feeling and hearing them was quite common for me growing up. My boyfriend is the same, but he often saw them while growing up and has always been scared of his gift, so he blocks it out most of the time. After moving in, I started to feel a presence, often while I was home alone, especially in the mornings or late at night. It's not a nice presence. I get the feeling of absolute dread. I get too scared to move, or my muscles go tight and I feel like I might have a panic attack. But as fast as it's brought on, it leaves, leaving me a little shaken. I mostly get this feeling down one end of the house, but I don't go down it very often, or in the baby's room in the walk-in robe, which I can't go in without turning the light on straight away. My boyfriend has also said in the mornings when he's home alone, I leave for work at 5 a.m. and he doesn't leave until 7 a.m. He gets the feeling he's not alone and often rushes out the door due to a feeling of uneasiness. Only recently have we both really confided in each other about the scary feelings we get while home alone. And I feel since we've been talking about our experiences, the more frequent they're becoming. The other night I woke up around 1:30 a.m., which I now do frequently, but has only become a thing since moving into the house. I checked my phone and then laid there for a bit and listened to my boyfriend grinding his teeth, wishing he'd be quiet. And the feeling of dread hit me so unexpectedly and sudden, I couldn't move. I felt my heartbeat racing in my chest. I went freezing cold, and I was too scared to open my eyes. I could have sworn someone was pacing around the bed, walking from my boyfriend's side to my side and then back again. Eventually, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, it stopped at the end of the bed. I know, cliché horror stuff. I eventually got the courage to open my eyes, and I could have sworn I saw the outline of someone at the end of the bed. I immediately picked my phone up and switched the torch on, and you already know how this bit ends. Nothing was there. So I left my torch on for a bit and cuddled with my boyfriend, who was still asleep, to calm down a bit, and then turned the light off and went back to sleep. No dramas, got up at 5 a.m. and headed to work. After I left my boyfriend that morning, he told me he had a horrible nightmare that was set in the house, and someone was trying to drown him. When he woke up, he felt like someone was pulling on his legs, and when he kicked out, he felt like he had actually kicked someone. He quickly sat up, and again, no one was there. He said he's never gotten ready for work quicker in his life. He was also an hour early. So yeah, We're that couple in a horror movie that bought a haunted house. So we're currently looking into cleansing our home to get rid of whatever entity who thinks they can live there rent-free without our permission. We're straight up not having a good time. If anyone has any suggestions on how to remove a spirit as well, that would be great. Last year, my wife and I moved into our new home. We were both so excited for many reasons, but also to decorate our new blank canvas. As such, we frequented many furniture shops and places like IKEA, etc. We went to a lovely little place about an hour's drive away in Scotland called House of Brewer. We saw so many lovely little things there, bought many items. One such item that we saw but never purchased was a cutting board by a particular artist. My wife was instantly fascinated. So we got home and, still excited, were on the iPad looking at more stuff and managed to search for the artist of the cutting board. She had many different types of merchandise, from coasters to wall art. So we decided to order a pack of coasters from Amazon. Along with it, I wanted a teaspoon rest. It was a specific arty one with a sketch of a cartoon-style cat. Anyway, the coasters and the teaspoon rest arrived, and I recall receiving them and taking them upstairs to show my wife in the front room. We were painting. I unpacked them all, and we commented on how much we loved them. That night, my in-laws came to visit and commented on how lovely the house was coming along. I showed them the new arty coasters as I knew they loved them. A few days later, we couldn't locate the coasters or the teaspoon rest. We ripped the house apart, which wasn't hard, as it was fairly bare due to us still decorating. But I didn't want to leave anything to chance, so I even searched all the moving boxes, etc. But after 2 days of searching, we gave up. Even my mother-in-law confirmed that we showed her the coasters, but can't recall where we put them afterward. We decided to get on with the house and hopefully they'll turn up. A few days later, the doorbell rings with its Amazon delivery, with our new coasters and teaspoon rest. I immediately went onto my Amazon app to check the orders, and it only confirmed delivery this morning. No record of the previous delivery. I'm not shy about the weird goings-on of the human psyche, but this is a new one to me. Surely it could have been a shared delusion. It still bugs me to this day. When I was 10, I was riding my bike home from a friend's house when I encountered a keelet. I live far north, and it was mid-December, so we were about halfway through the 3-month blackout. It was dark 24 hours a day. It was late afternoon, but if it weren't for the streetlights that lined every street, I wouldn't have been able to see a thing. I had to pedal slowly because I was bundled up in not only my heavy clothes, but also my windproof coveralls, because we were pre-blizzard. I stopped halfway up the hill that led to my street to take a puff of my inhaler and rest my legs. After my breathing slowed, I was able to hear a panting sound behind me. I turned around, expecting to see Petey, the coyote hybrid stray that was basically owned by the entire town. He was super friendly and was known to check on children when they were outside on their own. But Petey wasn't there. Thinking that my hearing was still a little fuzzy due to an inner ear infection that I had just gotten over, I shrugged it off and dismounted my bike. It was easier to walk alongside it at this point. As I was nearing my street, I felt a hot breath on the small bit of ankle that was exposed between my overalls and rolled down socks. Immediately, I stopped and looked around again. I was raised by a very superstitious family. My papa always says, if something seems to be a little off, then you're not perceptive enough. After a moment of surveying my surroundings, I saw a four-legged form trotting up the street behind me. It was too tall to be Petey, but too thin to be a wolf or loose hunting dog. So I began moving again, realizing that it was not an animal I could not predict. I kept my eyes on it and walked slowly, just in case it was a very malnourished wolf that was looking for something to eat. It was only when I slowly turned onto my street that I that the animal started walking faster. Its movements were so strange, and it made grunting noises that almost sounded human. When it suddenly began running, I pushed my bike back towards it and dashed up the hill towards my house. Our street was essentially a dirt road that turned onto our driveway. The dirt was muddy from melted snow, and I kept slipping. Rock cut my hands from stopping myself from hitting the ground, and my tiny ankles kept rolling. At one point, I couldn't catch myself in time, and I ended up sliding a few feet downhill. That's when I felt a searing pain on the back of my left leg. I cried out and rolled over to kick the animal off me. That was when I got a good look at my attacker. It was definitely a canine of some kind, but it didn't have any hair. Its skin looked like black metal under the flickering streetlight overhead. I didn't get a full look at it though, because I immediately began kicking at it with that leg that wasn't pinned by its paws and teeth. 2 good strikes to its side had it whimpering and jumping back, just enough for me to scramble to my feet and begin running again. I could feel blood rolling down my leg as my house came into view. I could still hear the dog growling as it sprinted after me. I screamed for my mom as I approached the front porch, praying that they were home and that their guns were nearby. Argo opened the door less than a moment after hearing my shouts. She says that all she saw was me half running, half crawling up the driveway, and that was all it took for her to run outside in her pajamas and bare feet. She heard a sort of howling noise as she picked me up and ran back up the steps. We got inside just as Katie was running out of the den with her 50-year-old AR-7. The rifle only worked like 40% of the time, but it was the only weapon that wasn't locked up in their bedroom closet. I wrapped my arms and legs around Arga and buried my face in her neck, sobbing violently. She could feel the warm blood from my leg against her back, and she immediately rushed into the kitchen to call Katie's mother Mary, who was staying at my Aunt Gloria's house. She's a nurse, and she'd be better than any doctor or shaman in the town. Grandma could hear my cries in the receiver and immediately got moving. Gloria, like everyone else in the family, lived on the same property, so it wouldn't take her long. Katie came in after about 10 minutes of scanning the perimeter of the house. She was soaked from the sleet that had started falling, and her hands were freezing when she ran in and started examining my face and neck. By then, Arga had gotten me to sit on the large ironwood dining room table, and they worked together to get several layers of clothing removed from my stiff body. I was still in shock and couldn't assist them in the painstaking process. Grandma and Gloria arrived just as they were getting me down to my long johns. Gloria had called my Uncle Cal and Papa before they left the house. I can remember hearing this and feeling a relief unlike any other. In my mind, they were and still are the strongest men in the world. If something hurt me, they would make sure that it would never come near me again. The 4 women panicked when they saw the source of all the blood I had lost. There were 5 large gashes about 5 inches long, with each one being about a half-inch wide. Luckily, Grandma essentially had everything she'd need to treat the wound, but she was adamant about getting me a tetanus/rabies vaccine ASAP. Kai and Parpos gathered a posse, and the large group combed the woods and streets of the town. There was a lockdown due to the possibility of this being a rabid animal. Everyone stayed inside for nearly 24 hours, until the men were able to confirm the coast was clear. Whatever had attacked me was gone. When I finally cleaned up with a drain put in my wounds, Cal sat down beside me on my parents' bed and asked me to recall everything that happened leading up to the attack. He asked if I had remembered smelling salt water, if I remembered seeing paw prints fading on the asphalt, if I remembered hearing chains rattling. Honestly, until he started asking me all this, I didn't really entertain the idea that this was supernatural. I thought it was just a sickly wolf or coyote who wanted to claim one more victim before going into the woods to die. Papa drew some sketches for me and asked if any of them looked like what attacked me. When I pointed out the one that most resembled the hairless beast, he immediately kissed the side of my head and hugged me close. Papa's a very stoic Inuit man who never physically showed affection. My moms tell me that when I was a baby, he only held me a handful of times, and it was always stiff. He loved me, they assured me, but he would never tell me as such. So when he pulled away from the embrace and stroked my hair with tea in his eyes, I became afraid. I remember asking him if I needed to go to the hospital, and a small chuckle in response. Without a word, he left, leaving Arga to assure me that I wouldn't be crossing the pearly gates anytime soon. In the 1950s, Papa had a friend that went by the name Howdy. He was also Inuit, and the two of them had basically grown up together. When they were both 15, Papa had joined Howdy on a hunting trip about 100 miles north of our property. This took place during the blackout as well. As they trekked through the thick brush of the tundra, Papa could remember seeing Howdy about 5 feet ahead of him. But suddenly, he wasn't there. There was a howl, a scream, and a growl before the overgrowth to Papa's right began to rustle violently. Before he could react, it went silent. He found Howdy's body about 10 yards away from the path. He was mauled and mangled to the point of being unrecognizable. But Papa knew it was his buddy. It took him 2 days to carry Howdy back to his truck so he could drive him home. Throughout this arduous hike, Papa could see large paw prints in the mud ahead of him. Each time he drew closer, they would disappear. When he was finally to the truck and setting Howdy up in the bed of it, he saw what he knew, what was responsible for ending the other man's life. A keyleth, something he had only read about, was pacing the edge of the trail, watching Papa with small but piercing eyes. Not unlike the legends of other black dogs, keyleth are large, black, and in this case hairless, canines that were known to attack travelers and kill them. From the legends told in our village, it was rare to survive a keyleth encounter, but those who did immediately went mad. As far as I know, I never went mad. Surprisingly, my wound healed in practically no time, and the only thing I had left of the encounter were horrific nightmares and a fear of the blackout. Arga maintains that despite disturbing life in our property, the most traumatizing thing she ever experienced was watching me scramble helplessly up our muddy driveway. She says that the screams that tore through my throat were what she'd imagined a damned spirit would sound like. My mum and I drive around a lot, just listening to music, talking, relaxing, etc. We tend to drive to and around many small towns, but we've also been known to stay in the city that we live in. However, we have learned to avoid certain road, let's call it First Street, because of a certain phenomenon. You see, almost every time we drive down First Street at night, we see flashing lights as if a big accident had happened. It's always at a specific intersection. We'll call it First and Madison. However, by the time we arrive at the point in the road, it's all gone. No police, no ambulances, nothing at all. It's as if everything disappeared into thin air. The first few times, it really freaked us out. But eventually, we came to the conclusion that it must be an imprint of some kind, and just tried to avoid the road at night. Tonight, we were driving on a completely separate street. We'll call it 17th. And we saw what appeared to be a massive wreck. We thought it was a real one, but waited to get closer to see if the road was completely blocked off. I looked down at my phone, and when I looked up, the lights were gone. Same shtick as the other road. Understandably, we were pretty freaked out, because this wasn't First and Madison, and this shouldn't happen, right? I frantically looked for stories online of people with similar experiences, but couldn't find any. Do you have any idea what this is? Have you ever experienced this before? We've had dogs sit at this house 2 other times and nothing happened. We have to spend the night here since the dogs have severe separation anxiety and will destroy the house if someone's gone for more than 2 hours. They can't come to our place because they'll attack dogs bigger than them, and ours are. Day 1. The first night we stayed here this week, we heard a voice at around 2 a.m. We looked around everywhere, inside and out. No one was there. No electronics were on. We locked all the doors, usually the back doors unlocked, especially because it's a gated community with security. We were creeped out, but kinda brushed it off. Day 2, we woke up in the morning. Everything seemed good. We checked everything out, and for some odd reason, the front door was unlocked. We knew it was locked the night before, because we checked all the locks 3 or 4 times. Day 3. This morning the gate was open. It's always closed no matter what. The cable box turned off on its own. My book was on the nightstand and unexplainably ended up behind the bed. The attic seemed off. We looked up there with a friend. Nothing was there, but it didn't feel right. We decided to try a Ouija board. We figured out there were 3 spirits here. 2 out of 3, female 54, and 1 male. Say there's a demon here. Then, when the 3rd spirit, Molly, came in, she also claimed she was a demon. Molly was very fast on the board, compared to the rest of the spirits. Spirit 1 didn't say much, just her gender and age, then said goodbye. Spirit 2 said a bit. He told us there were 3 of them here total. He told us about Molly. When talking to Molly, she told us she was 16,000 years old. She was also saying things that didn't make sense. She said Kevin and the FM5CU brought her here. We tried saying bye. The lights flickered like crazy and she said no. Eventually, she dragged the piece off the board and left. Before she left, though, she said that she was going to continue to bother us because we were visitors. We don't know tonight how it's going to fare, but we'll see. One of the dogs has been barking at nothing recently, and that's never happened before. I've also been waking up with bruises on my body. My boyfriend and I have no idea why. We'll leave tomorrow, but we're going to dog sit more for them, but we don't know what to do. I grew up with my grandma and lived with her most of my life, and her house always freaked me out because weird things happened. It's not like the house was old. No one had ever lived there previously, and it wasn't the typical scary house you think of when you think of a haunted house. I have my theories, but that's for another time, I suppose. Anyways, everyone in my family who stayed there has their own stories of things they've seen or heard, including myself. Some examples of what I experienced were hearing footsteps outside my door in the middle of the night, hearing someone in the master bathroom walking around and turning the sink on when I was the only one home. When I was young, I was sneaking downstairs to grab a snack and turned the corner to go downstairs and saw a little girl sitting on a big box we had at the bottom of the stairs, seeing figures of people on the walls moving around, and the list goes on. These things happened throughout my life and were spaced out occurrences, so I tried to just ignore it all the best I could. But what I experienced when my grandma was dying was some of the most intense things I've ever witnessed. My grandma had breast cancer. Eventually, it spread throughout her body, and she lost the battle. They put her in hospice, and we set up her living room for her to stay in, so we could take care of her. The last week of her life is when things started getting really weird. I'd be sitting on the couch next to her bed, and see people in the corner of my eye walking past the doorway and the hallway, even when it was just me and her in the house. And when other people were there, they saw it too. There were times she would be looking up to the ceiling or at the walls and smile like she was looking at someone she knew. Another time, my whole family was on the couch, just being with her, and the light in the room went out and my grandma smiled and said, "It'll come back on." Right when she said it, it did. While these occurrences were starting to happen frequently, it was just little things like that. But in the last few days of her life, she started declining more. So we bought a baby monitor with a camera to watch her when we weren't in the room, to make sure she didn't try and leave the bed. She kept trying to do things on her own and would fall. Well, one night, my sister and I were upstairs in her bedroom talking, and we looked at the monitor screen and I instantly started crying from what I saw. It's hard to describe what we saw. The only things that comes close is what looked like was a mix of a gremlin and golem. It felt so off. We watched it, almost like crawling or jumping up in her bed. She was asleep, but it seemed like she knew it was there because she made a movement with her hand, like she was hitting it away. And once she did that, it left. My sister went downstairs to check on her. She was still sleeping and nothing was there. It was one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life, and even after 6 years, just the thought of it makes the hair on my arms stand up and my eyes begin to tear up. It's not just because of how scary it looked, because of the way it made me feel. Even through the monitor, you could feel its presence and you could feel it was not good, whatever it was. The next night, my sister and I were back up in her bedroom watching a movie, and my sister looked at the monitor and studied it for a second and told me to look at it, which after what I had already witnessed, I was terrified to even look at. But I did, and clear as day, you could see a head behind my grandma, which looked like how she looked at the time, bald and sick, etc. So we took a picture of the monitor screen this time, and we zoomed in to see what it was. And we noticed that above that head was my uncle's face. You could see his features and could easily recognize it was him if you knew him. He was my grandma's son who died a few years back from cancer. While I don't really believe in God and am not sure where I stand on the afterlife, even after all my experiences, it was a feeling of relief seeing this after the horror I saw the night before. Almost like him saying, "It's okay, I got her." I have no idea what the head was behind her. My sister thinks it could be her starting to leave her body. It did look like it was her just watching her body laying there. A couple of days later, she passed away. For the next month we stayed there to pack up her house and sell it. And while there was some weird occurrences from time to time, that was pretty normal for the house, and it seemed like all the insane activity that occurred while she was dying had left with her. But I'll never forget the things I saw in the house during that time. And even as I'm writing all of this out, I have goosebumps. My experiences have been, 1, always feeling like something on my back chasing me when I walk through the laundry room. 2, one day, having a patch of darkness try to follow me up the stairs. I turned on the lights and it disappeared. It definitely wasn't the normal shadows that I'm used to seeing on the stairs. 3, I woke up and went back into a light sleep, where I had a dream where I approached a cat. It was fine, but then got all puffed up like cats do when suddenly scared. And it then jumped at me, but was really jumping the direction my back was turned in the real world. When I woke up, I immediately knew I had to turn. I feel the cat was giving me a warning of something. Like if I hadn't had it, something might have happened. I'm not overly religious, but I was raised Christian and wear an angel wing necklace my parents got me. And a part of me wants to believe that's what kept me safe, as it's believed to be a sign of, among many, protection. 4, another night morning, I woke up in a somewhat sleep paralysis state. I've had it many times, mainly as a kid, but during those times, my body wouldn't move and breathing was hard. Nothing appeared. However, this time, something did. I could look around, but the rest of my body wasn't moving. I had an insane sense of danger, and as I looked at the end of my bed, I saw something. It wasn't a scary demon. It was a fictional character from a video game. He didn't turn around, though. He just stared at the wall. Later, after I woke, I realized that danger was, in fact, coming from the form I saw. It took my guard down by appearing as something I trust, since this character's a good guy in the game, I guess. And also, that what it was probably staring at was a saint pendant I had hanging on that wall. Most recent experience happened yesterday. I had a mystic. I'm not too knowledgeable about it myself. Friend over, and he could tell right off the bat. He couldn't tell what it was, just that it's been there a while and has deep roots. Some of which being in the laundry room and that storage room, so my feeling was right about that. However, while looking for roots, he said that he was basically poking a stick at it, and honestly, I believe it, because last night I was literally running out of that house. I was pissed, becoming super active, causing creaking sounds. Nobody but me was home, and overall, that heavy feeling. What finally sent me to grab my stuff and leave the house was more noise and then a glimpse of something in the corner by the furnace. As I was grabbing my stuff, my phone connected to my Bluetooth speaker, and that was a mistake. The sudden loud music scared me more, and I believe it saw that as an opportunity to make a move. This feeling I can't describe came over me, and I was horrified and I ran. I left my bedroom light on and was out of there. I did turn my bike around and braved the basement to turn the light off after I calmed down a little, but it was still extremely pissed and chased me out of the basement. I decided to stay with my brothers until it calms down in the morning, hopefully. Another experience I thought I'd mention comes from my brother. He rented that basement before me. My brother woke up and had a form appear to him. It had taken the form of a woman this time, and if I remember correctly, he said her face was terrifying. He was sleeping in what would become my storage room. I just wanted to write this somewhere. Any suggestions or ideas of what's in my basement would be appreciated. I just want to be able to sleep without this constant feeling of fear. This has been occurring for months now, and what began as slight anxiety is now intense paranoia. Every night, I hear my cat outside my window crying. Not meowing, crying. Cat owners will understand what I mean. The first night, I walked outside without hesitation and called my cat. When that didn't work, I worried his legs or paws may be hurt, which would explain the crying. So I went and searched for him with my phone flashlight. That detail is important, because as you probably know, phone flashlights are not very bright. So when I saw something move in the bushes, it was impossible to tell if it was my cat or not. What I do know is that when I gave up and chalked his behaviour up to being a brat, because let's be real, what cat comes when they're caught? And it's no stretch for him to whine for no reason. I walked back inside my house to find my cat curled up and sleeping on my couch. There's no way he somehow got past me walking through the door without my knowledge. But still, I brushed it off because I suppose anything is possible. The next night, it happened about a week later, and by then, I'd forgotten about the first weird experience. Only when I looked to the foot of my bed and remembered my cat had been with me the entire time, it all came rushing back. I'm the girl who makes fun of horror movie characters for being stupid. So when I sauntered outside in morbid curiosity, let me honestly tell you, I've never retrospectively hated myself more. I went to my window and the crying was so clear, it had to be coming from within a few feet. But I didn't see a thing. Which is strange, because I definitely saw something the first night. It was around this time that the creepiness of it all hit me, and I all but ran back inside. I swore then that my cat lost his nighttime privileges and would be indoors by sundown, and I wouldn't investigate this anymore, naively thinking it would go away. It's just gotten worse. That was months ago, and the crying occurs almost nightly now. Barring a couple nights of feline rebellion, I've been vigilant about keeping it indoors at night, so I know for a fact that whatever I'm hearing is not my cat. It just sounds so realistic. Before you comment saying it was another cat, don't bother. I know what my cat sounds like. I'm a proud cat mom and I can tell them apart from the neighborhood strays. I'm familiar with being cautious of baby cries outside your door at night, because predators have been known to record them and bait women, especially weaponizing their maternal instinct. But who does that with a cat? For that to work, not only would they have to know I have a cat, but also somehow gain access to a recording of us crying and play it back for me every night outside my window. Hello, nightmare. I was in juvie as a kid pretty often. I ended up doing 4 months out of a 6-month sentence for possession with intent to distribute and probation violation, which was the longest I had gone to juvie. Ghost stories have been shared amongst the kids in there fairly often. The DOs, detention officers, would chime in time to time to tell theirs as well. Some pretty hard to buy because it's juvenile and there isn't much to do besides tell stories, especially when talking through vents and toilets. One night, it was time for lockdown, as in bedtime. So we all turned in our stuff and headed into our cells. This time of night, someone is usually talking to you through a vent, so we'd stay up a little bit after lockdown unless you were tired. Sometimes we'd fuck around and even holler out the cell door, saying insults to one another, or egging on the DOs to come into the pod just to annoy them. This night, we thought someone was fucking around. We hear what sounds like wailing, like someone pretending to be in pain echoing through a cell door. And so a lot of the kids were yelling for them to shut the fuck up and banging on the cell doors to get them to stop. A lot of threats were thrown out towards whoever was making the noise. Then, the wailing sounded like someone was actually in pain. Guttural moaning and groaning, sounds you would hear from someone dying. Absolutely terrifying to hear. I started to get chills down my back because it sounded unreal. Finally, the DOs came in and turned all the lights on and started calling out for whoever it was, seeing as someone sounded like they needed medical assistance. Then opened all of our doors and told us to step out so they could figure out who needs help. The sound kept going, even after we all stepped out and lined up downstairs. The sound was coming from the second level, from a cell that no one was inside of. 2 DOs went up and opened the door, and the wailing kept going. The DOs radio it and saying there's nobody in the cell, and they were openly talking about how creeped out they were. And then a DO rushed down the stairs and told another DO we all needed to leave the pod. We grabbed our blankets and moved to the pod across, all while this wailing was continuing. It was like something out of a horror movie. While we were waiting in the other pod for new cells to be assigned, the lights in the pod we were in had started to flicker. The look of horror on the kids' faces and the faces of the DOs sent goosebumps over my entire body, as we were all witnessing this. One DO even told us we needed to pray, so we all grabbed hands and began praying. Kids that hated each other were grabbing hands and praying. That's how wild this was. Eventually, we all were sent into our new cells and down for the night. The next morning, we were telling all the kids in the new pod about what happened, and they were shook. One DO had told us him and another DO had seen a black cloaked figure floating around in the pod around midnight, stopping at different cells. We never got moved back into that pod the rest of my time there. I saw they ended up making it a rec room for the blue shirts, kids with more privileges because of good behavior, the last time I was around. I love clowns. I happened to come across this precious clown-themed music player while thrifting. At the time, I couldn't find it anywhere online. It's pretty unique, I suppose. Only recently, I was able to find something about it online. It's called Moon Music Box by Empson Taiwan. I'm not 100% about it, but it's being sold by someone on Etsy. Back to the story. When I first got it, my roommate at the time was very uncomfortable around it. They had said while I was at work it would play by itself constantly, but I hadn't experienced it myself. I pushed it to the back of my mind, figuring it was old. I eventually moved in with a new roommate, and that's when things got a bit weird. I left it on my bookshelf. After a week or two, I started having dreams about a figure standing by my bookshelf. They'd be standing with the music player, twisting it, setting it down, and suddenly, I would wake up. The music player would be going on, and it would be moved to wherever the figure set it. I wouldn't always have the dream, but when I did, it was always horrifying. I would wake up in a panic, and feeling like I was being watched. The feeling of being watched never really left, but became tolerable. My friend had come to visit, so she slept in my room with me. She only stayed for one night. She ended up falling asleep before me. I was playing on my phone, and suddenly, I heard her talking in her sleep. Not even a few seconds later, the music player started going off. I got freaked out, and the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The room felt so cold and suffocating. The next day, she told me about her dream, and it was the same one I had. I tried throwing it away after that, but it made its way back into my room. I thought my roommate was messing with me, but they hated the thing as much as I did. After that, I had several months of silence. Not one dream, nothing. I moved out and was living on my own. Even then, there was no activity. Now I moved out of that apartment and living with my best friend and her husband. I didn't mention it before, but my cat absolutely despises this thing. He hisses out of nowhere and swats at it. Right now, it's on a shelf on the wall. That'll be important. I work overnight, 11 to 7 a.m. I've been living with my best friend for about a month now. The first few weeks were fine, but now things are getting weird again. The dreams came back. I dozed off at work around 4 a.m. maybe 2 days ago. In the dream, I was in my room. The figure standing by my bookshelf twisting the music player. A familiar setting, I guess. It set it down and I woke up to a text message from my friend. She asked if I was home and I said no. She said she heard music coming from my room. She went in to see what was going on after I asked her to. The music player was on my bookshelf, exactly where the figure had sat. Recently though, I've said that a lot, sorry. I had woken up from the dream, but something new happened. I was laying on my back and the figure clawed me. It was so painful. I shot awake and had a burning sensation from my shoulder down to my waist. I went to the bathroom to check it and of course, claw marks on my back. Much too large to be my cat's, plus he's incredibly sweet and would never. When I was 14, a couple years ago, I was home alone in my living room, playing Halo 3. I was just chilling when I heard lots of leaves rustle outside. I live in a pretty secluded forest, and my closest neighbour was roughly a mile away. My parents had gone to run errands and were about 30 minutes away. The time of year was in the beginning stages of fall, so all the leaves had started to drop. It wasn't windy outside, so I didn't expect any leaves to rustle as violently as they did. I thought a large animal might be moving around, and that's pretty normal, so I didn't care. That was until the rustling came right at my front door, which was right behind the couch I was sitting on. I was a little confused, and I sat there for a little while in silence. Then it happened. Huge, loud, ground-shaking slam landed on my door. I thought someone might be breaking in. It's very, very hard to describe the amount of fear that entered my body. The moment the thought that I would be robbed came into my mind. I couldn't move. I was petrified in fear. But after the 3 slams, surprisingly, banging stopped. I was just staying still, running scenarios through my head of what could have been. I gently picked my controller back up and started playing Xbox again, all the while being terrified. I started to hear leaves again, near the back of the house where my kitchen was. There was a sound of tapping on the window above my kitchen sink, and then a few loud slams again. This was terrifying enough, except this time, it was extremely loud primal screams. Whatever this was, it was circling my house. I grabbed a multi-tool knife from the drawer, and ran as fast as I could upstairs into my parents' bedroom and under their bed. I waited there for about half an hour and my parents finally arrived home. I, practically in tears, told them about what happened and they just spotted some sort of large animal. I still don't know what that was, and this experience never happened to me again in the remaining years we lived in that house. I was adopted into my current family about 5 years ago, that being February of 2017. My family had a nice house where my siblings and I all had our own room. There was also a basement, which at the time was a game room for all of us and was the biggest room in the house. Eventually, my 2 older brothers moved out during the second year of me living there. When they did, my sister and I decided to switch rooms. I got her room and she got the basement room. During those 2-ish years, my sister complained about numerous nightmares and claimed to have seen dark shadows at night, as well as hearing the boiler room and storage room door open. Me and my parents would just laugh at the claims and would say it was because of how late she would stay up and all those energy drinks she had. I wish I hadn't laughed. This past December of 2021, my sister moved out due to her graduating early, and my parents renovated the basement room where I then moved into. I was excited to have my own space downstairs. It's about the size of a smaller studio apartment, with enough closet space and a bathroom with a walk-in shower. On my first night in the basement, it was so messy due to moving everything downstairs. So I stayed up past midnight, organising everything, just wanting to get it done. I heard the basement door open. I thought it was my mom, so I naturally joked around and said, "Isn't it past your bedtime?" I called out. I opened the bedroom door and looked up the stairs to see the door just wide open. I was kind of confused, but just shook it off and closed it. I went back downstairs and closed the bedroom door. I eventually finished and went to bed. In the morning, I asked my mum if she went down there during the night, and she denied it. She claimed it was just me being tired, so I shook it off. I didn't experience anything for a few days. I came home from school one evening. I was home alone and came home to all of the basement doors open as well as the door to the basement. We have cats that weren't allowed downstairs, so I worried that they may have gotten into things. My mom never forgets to close the door because of that, so I immediately thought that someone may have broken in. But our front and back doors were all still locked, and I had come in through the garage. I ran down to check and I saw our cat in the boiler room. She was in the far corner and I heard her hiss at something. I swear to my biological parents that boiler room door swung closed. It's hard to shut due to the wood door frame being somewhat uneven. That's what confused me. Me, trying to be brave, I went into the corner, grabbed my cat, and I opened the door. I shut the remaining doors and went back upstairs where I found my mom just coming home. "What are you doing with the cat?" she asked me. "Did you leave a bunch of doors open?" I asked her. "No, I haven't been home since 8 a.m. and haven't needed to go down there." "Why?" I told her about what happened, and she mentioned how maybe my brother stopped by and pulled a prank on me. But neither of us could explain the door swinging closed. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. I began to get all paranoid and started to overthink the situation from earlier. Then it hit me. I remembered the things my sister complained about when she lived in the basement. The next morning, I brought it up to my mom, and she looked somewhat concerned. She never believed in the paranormal stuff, but I did. I'm pretty sure this convinced her. After this, it kept happening. The boiler room door would be open mostly, but from time to time, my bedroom door and storage room door would be open. Lights going crazy on and off happened a few times as well. I had my one and only incident of sleep paralysis, where I thought I saw a tall shadow in my bathroom doorway. I decided to ask for help. My friend's mom was a medium, and I asked her if she could come to look and step into the basement to see. She agreed and came over one night. It was back in April. She said she was drawn into the boiler room immediately. She claimed that the energy was dark in that room specifically, and that there was some type of spirit, and perhaps an entity that was just trying to find peace and was just angry. She suggested we get the house blessed by a professional. My mom and I appreciated the help, and she left. My parents knew the house's history, and we were all confused. To this day, now late May of 2022, these events still occur, despite having had the house blessed 2 times, but the activity has slowed down. I honestly believe that my sister's collectible antiques may have gotten attached to the house, but I'm not sure. She had a few creepy clown dolls and old frames for aesthetic purposes back in high school, but then again, those items aren't in our house anymore. I'll take any tips if you have them. Okay, so my whole family is in tune with some kind of spirituality or paranormal shit. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Both my parents and all my siblings, there's 8 of us, have seen or heard or felt ghosts, demons, or other dimensional beings, whatever the fuck you want to call them. I have a handful of stories both from my personal experiences and the stories my family has told me. For now, let me tell you about these green hands I saw when I was 8 years old. I've been scared of the dark until I was 27. I'm 32 now. I was always a scared little boy because of all the shit I've seen and heard. So I used to sleep with the light on when I was a kid. I shared a room with my older brother, but my bedtime was like 8 p.m. and his was 11 or 12. So for hours, I would be too afraid to fall asleep and I would wait for him to come to bed. So I'd feel safe closing my eyes knowing he's with me, you know? Sometimes he just wouldn't come to sleep. So I eventually fell asleep waiting for him with the light on. Whenever I closed my eyes, I would be so scared of seeing something in front of me, like a huge face or monster or some shit when I opened them. So I'd pull the blankets over my head and tuck my feet in and sleep all balled up under the tight blankets and try to sleep. But because I was a fat kid, I'd sweat on the pillow because I was so fucking hot under there, breathing so hard, you know? My brother would come home late at night and be super pissed that the pillow would be damp and the blankets and all that. So we made us use a bed sheet as a blanket since it was way thinner. For nights and nights I slept under the sheet and didn't sweat anymore. But one night I wasn't tired and I just couldn't go to sleep. I remember staring around the room and just talking to myself and imagining what I would do tomorrow at school and stuff. Just kid stuff. And I remember this clear as day. Like I've told people this story and I don't know what to say anymore. I know it to be true, but who knows? So as I'm laying there on my back, I had the sheet tucked under my heels so the sheet was pulled tight and taut over my toes. It was a Mickey Mouse Goofy Donald Duck sheet, just so you know. And I don't remember if I heard a noise or anything, but I was staring at my feet and I saw these two huge green hands slowly creeping up from under the bed. The foot of the bed, not the sides. Now these hands were ugly, straight up green like a goblin or orc. Long nails, yellowish, bumpy, and each hand was the size of two hands. They both came up, hands open, like they were going to high-five my feet. And I remember it was so slow too. But I was paralyzed. I couldn't move or scream or do anything but stare. It was so unreal. They crept and grabbed the loose sheet under my feet and pulled it hard from under my heels, and then slowly lifted the sheet over my feet. Now I can see my skin. I saw my feet exposed and they let go of the sheet, and right before they grabbed me, I fucking screamed. Like instant crying and tears and screaming. I jerked my feet back and saw them slowly slither back under the bed with their hands still open. Like they looked like they belonged to that eyeball hand creature from Pan's Labyrinth, only green. I screamed for my mom and my stepdad, while crying and with my knees curled up to my chest. And I remember my parents took their sweet time to come to my aid too. I felt like I was sitting on my bed for like 30 to 40 whole seconds. So when my mom busted in to see what's wrong, I immediately jumped off the bed and ran into her arms crying. Pointing at the end of the bed, telling her, "There's hands. There's green hands. I saw them." And she's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" My stepdad came in and she told him what I said, and he was just as confused. He walked over and checked under the bed and found nothing, of course. Just a backpack and a shirt and maybe a wrestling toy. Steve Austin, I don't know. But nothing was there, and said I was dreaming. Now I know for damn sure I was not dreaming, because this night I couldn't sleep, and I decided to just stay awake and wait for my brother to come home. I never pulled the sheet over my head. That's how I slept every night, sheet over my head. I can't see them, they can't see me kind of thing. So was I dreaming? Definitely not. So now I'm a trembling, horrifying, snot-nosed, watery-eyed, rambling kid, and I begged my mom to let me sleep with my sister. She said no. Stepdad said no. It was just a dream. Go to sleep, you'll be okay. Nah, fuck that. I am not sleeping on that bed or this room tonight, you know? So I begged and cried and squeezed her harder, looking up at her, pleading for my life. And eventually she said, "Okay, just tonight." I slept with my sister for like 2 weeks. Fuck that. But my mom was religious, and we all went to church on Sundays, you know? She just wanted us to pray, and I'd be safe, but even still, I just couldn't sleep in that room anymore unless I was with someone. No one knew what happened. It was just a weird night. But my sisters knew something had to have happened because we all saw some weird shit in that house and other houses. So that was just another thing to add to why we like to sleep with the lights on. After many months, I forgot about what happened. I moved into my sister's room and we shared it. I don't know what to say. I saw green hands. I felt them pull my sheet over my feet. I saw it. I don't know what they were or what they were connected to or who or nothing. It's scary, sure, but now as an adult, I don't know what to think. It's odd. It's terrifying, but I don't know. Maybe I hallucinated. Maybe I did dream it, who knows? As an adult, I don't know how to veritably explain it. I'm open to possibilities, but deep in me, I believe it was real and it did happen. For the last few years, I keep hearing at least a couple times a day what sounds like a big truck backing up. The low beep, 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 beep sound. Now, I've always just figured it was indeed just that, but I've heard it at least once a day or every other day, no matter where or what time it occurred. Whether it's in my town in Tennessee I'm from during normal times, the UPS or some kind of truck would be active, or at 2 a.m. I've heard it in Iceland and Ireland on trips that I would be the only places overseas I've been. Also, I was in Iceland during summer solstice, where it was 24 hours daylight, and was at the Secret Solstice Festival at a show where Foo Fighters was playing, and heard it, which was the first time I was concerned. Because over Dave Grohl and hundreds of people cheering, why would I hear that? I thought maybe it was a side effect of tinnitus, which occasionally I have spurts of. Weird sci-fi sounding beeps in one ear, like I'm losing signal or something. But that's all I can explain for that. I also think tinnitus is something different, and maybe that's another sound I should inquire about. I just can only assume that it is what it is. It's just 3 a.m. now, and I heard the truck sound again, and I know there is no one always expecting a truckload of something nearby, or I would hear it. If anyone knows about any phenomenon that may be tied to that, or some auditory hallucination side effect of some potentially concerning disorder, please let me know. I've heard that sound of a car door or other things like that at night can be tied with the presence of an entity or spirit. I don't have health insurance, so I'm trying to find a medical specialist as my first attempt to get some information while being broke. I thought I'd share here first because I've certainly had paranormal experiences, but not sure if this is one or not. I haven't really found anything similar so far online. I'm really at the stage where it's becoming something I should be concerned, no matter what the source of it is. I've always been interested in the paranormal, fascinated by the TV shows, stories, mediums, evidence, etc. I had 2 unexplainable incidents happen when I was a kid, but never gave them much attention. My grandfather's house was known to be haunted, but nothing negative. My cousin and a friend went on a tour of eastern states in Pennsylvania, and I was like, if you guys do something like that again, let me know. So fast forward, a friend found this group called Ghost Hunts USA, and they take you to haunted locations and do investigations with you. They're a great group if anyone would ever want to try. They're on Facebook and have a website. We booked an event with them at Mid-Orange County Correctional Facility in New York in the summer of 2019. This tour changed everything and left us with more questions. We heard disembodied voices, equipment was successfully going off, but it wasn't until the guide took us to this hallway and separated all of us. She had us stand in the doorways of each room down this hall. She began speaking to the spirits, telling them she was sorry for the way they were treated, to show us we're here by giving signs or making noises. This we would hear bangs all over. There was no wind or any kind of weather elements that could contribute to these noises. She then told the spirits that they could touch us appropriately. I felt a tingle on my back. I felt a pressure, almost as if someone had their finger pushed into my shoulder blade. The guide kept talking about the abuse they dealt with. I began to feel sad. I leaned over to my cousin and whispered, I feel sad. Then I called out to the guide that I really feel sad. This all happened so quickly. Within seconds, and I suddenly felt so overcome with sadness, I began sobbing uncontrollably. I felt the deepest sorrow and despair, complete heartache. This was bone deep. I felt it to my core. The guide and my cousin had to remove me from the building. As I left, I began to feel lighter and stopped crying, but the feeling of sorrow stayed with me. I paced outside for a good 10 minutes, trying to understand what just happened. I didn't understand. I didn't know anything. I was then told I had experienced depression. Spirits can project their emotions onto you. Afterwards, my chest hurt for a long time, and I refused to return to that hallway. I was shaking. We investigated a building just off the hallway where that happened, and my name came up on a spirit box app. After this, we became invested and started our own ghost hunting team where more crazy things have personally happened. We visited the real conjuring home, which left me feeling sick. That's a whole story of its own. In 2021, we started a video documenting everything and started a YouTube channel.